Serafina Vale stands 6 steps behind her husband in his Manhattan penthouse, watching him laugh with men who speak of her like she's livestock. "The Vale girl?" one says. "Pretty enough. Fertile, I hope." Dorian Blackthorne doesn't defend her. He refills their glasses. She's holding a whiskey tray and a pregnancy test in her coat pocket, and she realizes with cold clarity that the man she married never intended to love her at all. So she sets down the tray, removes her gloves, and walks out through the servants' exit into the October night, not to make a scene, but to vanish. If you want to see how far this story travels, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I read every single one. Now, let's begin. The penthouse smelled like imported cigars and old money, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because it had been announcing itself for 3 generations. Serafina Vale, no, Serafina Blackthorne now, though the name still felt like a coat that didn't fit, moved through the marble hallway with a silver tray balanced on her palms. Whiskey, 4 glasses. No ice, because Dorian's guests preferred it neat, preferred everything controlled and deliberate and exactly the way they wanted it. She could hear them in the study. Dorian's voice first, smooth and low, the kind of voice that made boardrooms go quiet and rivals reconsider their strategies. Then Marcus Kell, his oldest friend and the family's lead enforcer, all gravel and sarcasm. Then 2 others she didn't know well, men in tailored suits who smelled like cologne and threat. "The Vale girl was a smart play," one of them said, and Serafina froze 3 steps from the door. "Old family, clean reputation, no ties to law enforcement. You needed the legitimacy." "She's beautiful," the other added. "That helps." Marcus laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. "Pretty enough, I guess, long as she's fertile. That's the point, right? Heir and a spare?" Serafina's fingers tightened on the tray. The crystal glasses didn't rattle. She'd learned early in this marriage not to let anything rattle. "She's obedient," Dorian said, and his tone was flat, clinical, like he was discussing a well-trained dog. "Doesn't ask questions, doesn't push, keeps the house running, shows up when I need her to, stays quiet when I don't. It's working." "Romantic," Marcus drawled. "Romance is expensive," Dorian replied. "This is a business." Serafina stood there in the hallway, tray in hand, and felt something inside her chest go very still. Not broken, just still. Like a lake freezing over in winter, silent and complete. She'd known this marriage wasn't a love story. Her father had made that clear when he'd brokered the arrangement 6 months before his death. Dorian Blackthorne needed legitimacy, the Vale family needed protection, and Serafina was the price of the deal. She'd gone into it with open eyes. She'd told herself she could make it work. She'd told herself that quiet persistence and careful kindness would eventually mean something. But standing there, listening to her husband describe her like a useful piece of furniture, she realized she'd been lying to herself. She walked into the study. 4 men looked up. Dorian didn't stand. He never stood for her anymore, not since the wedding photos were taken and the alliance was signed. She set the tray down on the side table, poured each glass with steady hands, and met no one's eyes. "Thank you, Serafina," Dorian said, dismissive and polite. She nodded, smiled the way she'd been taught to smile, and walked out. In the hallway, she kept walking, past the marble foyer, past the powder room where she'd cried exactly once 3 months ago, after Dorian had looked through her at a charity gala like she was glass. Past the kitchen where the staff pretended not to notice that the master bedroom had 2 beds now, separated by 8 feet of imported rug and a silence that could choke. She went to her dressing room, closed the door, and pulled the pregnancy test out of her coat pocket. 2 lines, clear and certain. She sat down on the velvet bench and stared at it until the light through the window turned gold, then orange, then gone. At midnight, Serafina packed a single bag. Not the Louis Vuitton luggage Dorian had given her as a wedding gift, but an old leather duffel she'd kept from college, back when she'd thought the world might let her be something other than a bargaining chip. She packed clothes that didn't scream money, jeans, sweaters, a wool coat, her grandmother's ring, the one her father had let her keep, a burner phone she'd bought 2 weeks ago during a moment of clarity she hadn't wanted to name. The staff was asleep. Dorian was still in the study, probably working through contracts or calls to Shanghai, or wherever his empire needed tending at this hour. He wouldn't notice she was gone until morning, and by then it wouldn't matter. She left her wedding ring on the nightstand, not dramatically, No note, no smashed glass, no theater. Just set it down next to the lamp, a small circle of gold on black wood, and walked out. The service elevator took her down 30 floors in silence. The night doorman, Miguel, glanced up from his phone as she crossed the lobby. "Mrs. Blackthorne," he said, surprised. "Do you need a car?" "No, thank you," she said. "Just getting some air." He frowned, but didn't push. Serafina had always been kind to him, remembered his daughter's name, asked about his mother's surgery. He nodded and let her go. The October air hit her like cold water, sharp and clean. She walked 4 blocks before hailing a cab, gave an address on the Upper West Side, and paid in cash. The driver didn't ask questions. Manhattan at midnight was full of women leaving places they didn't want to explain. The apartment belonged to her Aunt Marielle, her father's younger sister, a woman who'd never married into power and had no regrets about it. Marielle opened the door in a silk robe and reading glasses, took one look at Serafina's face, and stepped aside. "I'll make tea," she said. They sat in the small kitchen, the kind of kitchen that belonged to someone who actually cooked instead of employing people to cook for them. Marielle didn't ask the obvious questions. She just waited, the way she'd always waited, patient and sharp, and entirely unimpressed by the Blackthorne name. "I'm pregnant," Serafina said. Marielle's expression didn't change. "Does he know?" "No." "Are you going to tell him?" Serafina wrapped her hands around the mug. It was warm, real. "I don't know. Maybe. Eventually. But not now. Not while I'm still—" She stopped, started again. "I need to leave, Marielle. I need to actually leave. Where will you go?" "Ravenshade." Marielle raised an eyebrow. Ravenshade House was the old Vale estate up in the Hudson Valley, 2 hours north of the city. It had been in the family for 4 generations, passed down through her father's line. Serafina had inherited it when he died, though she hadn't set foot in it since the funeral. Dorian had suggested selling it. Too much upkeep, too isolated, no strategic value, but she'd refused. It was the only thing she'd refused him. "It's half falling apart," Marielle said. "I know. No staff, no security. I'll hire people. Dorian will look for you." Serafina met her aunt's eyes. "Let him?" Marielle studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You'll need a lawyer, someone outside the Blackthorne network. I was thinking Silas Merrick." "Good choice. He's expensive, but he's clean. I'll call him in the morning." Marielle reached across the table and squeezed Serafina's hand. "You're stronger than you think, sweetheart." Serafina wasn't sure she believed that, but she nodded anyway. Dorian noticed she was gone at 7 in the morning, when his assistant brought coffee to his desk and mentioned that Mrs. Blackthorne hadn't been in the kitchen for her usual espresso. He frowned, checked his phone, no messages, and assumed she'd gone out early. Shopping, maybe, or one of those silent charity breakfasts she attended to make him look civic-minded. By noon, when she still wasn't answering her phone, he started to feel the edges of something unfamiliar. Not worry, exactly. Irritation, maybe. Inconvenience. By 6 that evening, when the staff confirmed she hadn't been home all day and her wedding ring was sitting on the nightstand, he felt something closer to anger. He called Marcus. "She left," Dorian said. "Left like went to her mother's for the weekend left, or left like left? Her ring's here. Her clothes are mostly here, but she took a bag, and she's not answering." Marcus was quiet for a beat. Then, "You want me to track her phone?" "She's my wife, not a hostile asset." "You sure about that?" Dorian hung up. He stood in the bedroom, staring at the ring on the nightstand, and tried to remember the last time he'd actually looked at Serafina. Really looked, not just registered her presence like furniture or weather. He couldn't. He'd been busy. The business was expanding into new territories, new revenue streams. He'd been managing the family's interests, negotiating with people who'd kill him if they thought they could get away with it. He'd been doing what his father had trained him to do, control everything, trust no one, and never, ever let sentiment cloud judgment. Serafina had been easy. She'd asked for so little. She'd been there when he needed her and invisible when he didn't. He'd thought that was ideal. Now, standing in the empty room, he realized he didn't actually know anything about her. Not what she thought about. Not what she wanted. Not why she'd agreed to marry him in the first place, beyond the obvious transactional reasons. He picked up the ring. It was warm from the lamp, delicate and expensive. He'd chosen it himself, or rather, He'd told his jeweler to choose something appropriate. He couldn't remember if Serafina had ever said she liked it. He pocketed the ring and walked out. Silas Merrick was 63, silver-haired, and had a reputation for taking cases no one else would touch. He met Serafina at a cafe in Cold Spring, a small town near Ravenshade, and listened to her story without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "You want to divorce him?" "I don't know yet," Serafina said. "Right now, I just want to make sure he can't take Ravenshade, or the baby. The house is yours outright. Your father's will was clear. As for the child," he paused. "New York custody law is complicated. You're married. He's the legal father. If he wants shared custody, he'll get it. If he wants to fight you, it'll be expensive and ugly." "I have money," Serafina said. "My inheritance." Blackthorn has more. She knew that. She'd always known that. But she also knew that Dorian's power came from control, from the assumption that people would bend rather than break. She wasn't going to bend anymore. "Then we'll be smart," she said. "I'm not trying to destroy him. I just need space, time, a life that's mine." Silas studied her, then he smiled, small and sharp. "I'll draw up the paperwork. Separation agreement, custody framework, asset protection. If he's reasonable, this can be clean. If he's not," he shrugged. "We'll be ready." Tab. Ravenshade House stood on 20 acres of woods and overgrown gardens, a sprawling stone structure with turrets and ivy, and windows that caught the light like broken glass. It had been beautiful once. Now it was haunted by deferred maintenance and the ghosts of better days. Serafina hired a local contractor to fix the roof, a housekeeper named Rose who'd worked for her grandmother, and a part-time groundskeeper who asked no questions and kept the driveway clear. She bought groceries in town, learned how to light the old fireplace, and spent her evenings reading in the library while the wind rattled the shutters. For the first time in months, she could breathe. She didn't hear from Dorian for 2 weeks. Then, on a cold November afternoon, his car pulled up the driveway. She watched from the library window as he got out, alone, and stood looking at the house like he was trying to figure out what it meant. He was wearing a dark coat and no tie, which was unusual. Dorian always wore ties. She met him at the front door before he could knock. "Serafina," he said, and his voice was careful, controlled. "Dorian." They stood there, 3 feet apart, and she could see him taking inventory. Her loose sweater, her bare feet, the way her hair was down instead of pinned up the way he preferred. She looked different. She felt different. "You left," he said. "Yes." "Why?" She almost laughed. "You're serious." His jaw tightened. "I'm asking because you don't love me," she said simply. "Because I'm not a person to you. I'm a role, a function, and I'm done with that." "That's not—" "It is," she interrupted. "I heard you, Dorian, that night. She's obedient, doesn't ask questions. It's working. Like I'm a system you optimized." He went still. She watched him process it, calculate how much she'd overheard, how much damage control he needed to deploy. "I was talking to associates," he said finally. "They don't need to know." "I don't care what they need to know," Serafina said, and her voice was steady. "I care that it's true. You married me because I was useful. Fine. I accepted that. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being useful and nothing else." Dorian stared at her. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely lost. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to leave." "Serafina, I'm pregnant," she said. The words landed like a stone in deep water. Silence. Then, "What?" "I'm pregnant. 10 weeks. I'm keeping the baby. You can be involved or not. That's your choice. But I'm staying here. And you're not." He took a step forward. She didn't move. "This is my child," he said, and there was something raw in his voice now, something that sounded almost like fear. "Yes." "You can't just—" "I can," she said, "and I am. If you want to talk about custody or support or any of it, you can call Silas Merrick. He's my lawyer, but right now I need you to go." Dorian looked at her like she was a stranger. Maybe she was. Maybe she'd always been a stranger and he'd just never bothered to notice. "I'll fix this," he said. "There's nothing to fix. This is just what it is now." She stepped back and closed the door. Through the frosted glass, she watched his shadow stand there for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his car. She didn't cry. She just locked the door, went back to the library, and sat by the fire until the light outside turned dark. That night, alone in the house with the wind howling through the eaves, Serafina felt the baby move for the first time. A flutter, faint and strange, like a bird trapped under her ribs. She put her hand on her stomach and whispered, "It's going to be okay." She didn't know if that was true, but she said it anyway. Outside, snow began to fall. The first snow melted by morning, leaving the grounds around Ravenshade slick and dark. Serafina woke to Rose knocking softly on the bedroom door, her voice tight with something that might have been worry. "Mrs. Blackthorne, there's a man at the gate." Serafina sat up, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "Dorian?" "No, ma'am. Says his name is Marcus Kell." Her blood went cold. Marcus didn't make social calls. Marcus was the kind of man who showed up when things needed to be managed, controlled, or quietly disappeared. She dressed quickly, jeans, boots, a thick sweater, and found him waiting in the front hall. He looked out of place against the old wood paneling and faded portraits, too sharp and modern, like a blade left on an antique table. "Serafina," he said, and his voice was almost polite. Almost. "You're not welcome here. Dorian sent me." "I don't care." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "He's worried about you, about the baby. He wants to make sure you're safe." "I'm fine." "This house is in the middle of nowhere, no security, one old woman and a part-time landscaper. You're carrying a Blackthorne heir. That makes you a target." Serafina crossed her arms. "A target for who? You really don't know?" Marcus tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't bothered solving before. "Your husband has enemies, Serafina, real ones. People who'd love to get leverage on him. And right now you're walking around unprotected, playing house in a building that probably doesn't even have working locks." "Then maybe Dorian should have thought about that before he treated me like livestock." Marcus's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or something close to respect. "So you did hear that conversation?" "Every word." "And you're still keeping the baby?" "It's my baby," she said. "Not his bargaining chip, not yours, mine." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but you should know, Dorian's not going to let this go. He's going to want access, custody, a role. He can want whatever he likes. I'm not going back to that penthouse. I'm not asking you to." Marcus pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the hall table. "But if something happens, if you see anyone you don't recognize, if anything feels wrong, call me. I don't care what you think of Dorian. That baby is still family, and we protect family." He left before she could argue. Serafina stood in the hallway, staring at the card. Marcus Kell's name in raised black letters, a phone number, nothing else. She should have thrown it away. Instead, she slipped it into her pocket. Dorian didn't call, didn't text. For 3 weeks, there was nothing but silence from Manhattan, and Serafina tried to convince herself that was what she wanted. The house settled into a rhythm. Rose came 3 days a week, cooking meals that actually tasted like food instead of art, asking gentle questions about the baby's due date and whether Serafina had thought about names. The contractor finished the roof and started on the windows. The groundskeeper cleared the old garden paths, revealing stone walkways Serafina had forgotten existed. She started to feel like a person again, instead of a performance. But the quiet didn't last. It was Rose who noticed first. "There's a car," she said one afternoon, standing at the kitchen window with a dish towel in her hands. "Been parked down the road for 2 days now. Black sedan, tinted windows." Serafina joined her at the window. The car was barely visible through the trees, just a dark shape against the gray November sky. "Could be someone visiting a neighbor," Serafina said, but her voice was uncertain. "Nearest neighbor is 3 miles away," Rose said quietly. That night, Serafina locked every door and window. She pulled Marcus's card out of her pocket and stared at it for 10 minutes before finally dialing. He answered on the second ring. "Serafina, there's a car outside the property. It's been there for days." "What kind of car?" "Black sedan. I can't see the plates from here." She heard him typing something, then a pause. "Stay inside, lock the doors. I'm sending people." "Marcus, this isn't a negotiation. If someone's watching you, they're not just curious. Stay inside. He hung up. Serafina sat in the library with the lights off, watching the driveway. An hour later, 2 SUVs pulled up, dark and sleek and unmistakably Blackthorn. 4 men got out, all wearing the kind of suits that concealed weapons, and split up, 2 walking the perimeter, 2 heading toward the road where the sedan had been parked. 15 minutes later, one of them knocked on the front door. "Mrs. Blackthorn? The car's gone. We're going to post someone at the gate tonight, just in case." I didn't ask for security. The man, young, maybe 30, with a scar along his jawline, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Blackthorn did. "I don't want his people here. With respect, ma'am, it's not about what you want right now. Someone was watching this house. We don't know who or why. Until we do, you've got protection whether you like it or not." He walked away before she could argue. Dorian called the next morning. "Are you okay?" he asked, and he sounded like he hadn't slept. "I'm fine." "Marcus said there was a car." "There was. Your people scared it off." "Serafina, I didn't ask for this, Dorian. I didn't ask for bodyguards or surveillance or whatever this is." "You're carrying my child," he said, and his voice went hard. "You don't get to pretend you're not part of this world anymore. You married into it. That doesn't just go away because you moved to the countryside." "I know exactly what I married into," she snapped. "I just didn't realize it came with a lifetime surveillance contract. I'm trying to keep you safe." "You're trying to keep control." Silence. Then, those aren't mutually exclusive. Serafina closed her eyes. "I need space, Dorian. Real space. Not just physical distance with your people watching me from the shadows." "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because He stopped. Started again. "Because if something happens to you, it's on me, and I can't—" Another pause. "I can't let that happen." It was the closest thing to vulnerability she'd ever heard from him, and it made her angrier, not softer. Because where had that been 6 months ago? Where had that been when she was standing in his penthouse, invisible and alone, trying to figure out how to matter to a man who'd never intended to see her? "You don't get to care now," she said quietly. "You don't get to suddenly be concerned because the stakes changed. I needed you to care when it was just me, not when there's a baby involved, not when it's strategic." "Serafina." She hung up. Outside, the security guard was still posted at the gate, a dark figure against the winter bare trees. She wanted to send him away, but she didn't, because Marcus had been right. She was a target now, and she couldn't pretend otherwise. Silas Merrick came to the house a week later, carrying a leather folder and wearing a grim expression. "We need to talk about the car," he said. They sat in the library. Rose brought coffee, then disappeared. Silas opened the folder and pulled out a photograph, a grainy image of the black sedan, license plate visible. "This vehicle is registered to a shell company in Delaware," Silas said. "The company is owned by another shell company, which is owned by a third entity. But if you dig deep enough, it traces back to the Costello family." Serafina's stomach dropped. "The Costellos? You know them?" "I know of them. They've been trying to edge into Blackthorn territory for years. Dorian's father pushed them out of Manhattan before he died. They've been waiting for an opening ever since." Silas nodded. "If they know you're pregnant, they'll see you as leverage. A way to hurt Dorian or force a negotiation. You need to take this seriously, Serafina." "I am taking it seriously." "Then you need to let Blackthorn's security stay. I know you don't want his people here, but right now they're the only thing standing between you and a very dangerous situation." Serafina stared at the photograph. The sedan looked innocuous, just another car on a country road. But she could feel the weight of what it represented, the world she'd tried to leave, coming to find her anyway. "What if I hired my own security?" she asked. "With what money? Your inheritance is substantial, but Dorian's resources are 10 times that. And his people are already trained, already loyal, already in place. You'd be starting from scratch." "So I'm just supposed to trust him?" "No," Silas said. "You're supposed to be pragmatic. Use his resources while protecting your autonomy. Let his people guard the perimeter, but don't let him into the house. Don't let him dictate your choices. You can accept help without surrendering control." It made sense. She hated that it made sense. "Fine," she said, "but I want it in writing. A formal agreement. His security stays outside. They don't enter the house without my permission. They don't report my movements to him. They're here to protect me, not surveil me. Silas smiled. I'll draft it today. Boy, the agreement took 2 days to negotiate. Dorian pushed back on almost every clause. He wanted access to the house, wanted daily updates, wanted veto power over her decisions. Serafina refused on all counts. Finally, he relented and the contract was signed. 4 guards rotated shifts at the gate. 2 more patrolled the property perimeter. Serafina barely saw them, but she felt their presence, a constant hum of surveillance that made her skin itch. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the baby, on preparing the nursery in the East Wing, on learning how to live in a house that was finally starting to feel like hers. But the isolation was starting to wear on her, Rose noticed. You should get out more, she said one afternoon, folding laundry in the kitchen. Go into town, see people. You can't just hide up here. I'm not hiding. Rose gave her a look, patient, knowing, the kind of look that said, I've known you since you were 6 years old. Don't lie to me. Fine, Serafina admitted. Maybe I'm hiding a little. You've got guards now. You're safe. Go get some air. So Serafina drove into Cold Spring, the small town 10 minutes south of Ravenshade, and walked through the main street like a normal person. She bought bread at the bakery, browsed the bookstore, sat in a cafe with a cup of decaf tea, and watched people pass by. It felt like freedom. Small, fragile, but real. She was walking back to her car when she saw him. A man standing across the street, watching her. Tall, dark coat, hands in his pockets. He wasn't trying to hide. He was just standing there, staring. Serafina's pulse kicked up. She walked faster. The man followed, keeping pace, not closing the distance, but not falling back either. She reached her car, fumbled with the keys. The man crossed the street. Mrs. Blackthorne, he called. She froze. He stopped 10 feet away, hands still in his pockets, expression calm. I just want to talk. I don't know you. No, but I know you. And I know your husband. He smiled, and it was cold, precise. Vincent Costello sends his regards. The name hit her like a fist. Vincent Costello, head of the Costello family, the man who'd been circling Dorian's territory for years, waiting for a weakness. I don't have anything to say to Vincent Costello, Serafina said, and her voice was steadier than she felt. That's fine. He has something to say to you. The man pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and held it out. He wants to meet. Just a conversation. No threats, no games. He thinks you might be interested in what he has to offer. I'm not. You sure? Because from where I'm standing, you don't look too happy with your current arrangement, living alone in that big house, husband's men watching you like a prisoner. Costello could offer you a different option. I don't need options from a man who sent someone to stalk my home. The man shrugged. That wasn't us. But if you change your mind, he set the paper on the hood of her car. The offer stands. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd before she could respond. Serafina stood there, shaking, staring at the folded paper. She should have left it there, should have driven straight back to Ravenshade and called Marcus. Instead, she picked it up. Inside was an address, a restaurant in Beacon, 20 minutes north, and a time. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. She crumpled the paper, threw it in the passenger seat, and drove home. Buzz. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the encounter over and over. Vincent Costello wanted to meet. Why? What could he possibly offer her that she'd want? Unless it wasn't about offering her something, unless it was about taking something from Dorian. She thought about calling Marcus, thought about calling Dorian, but the idea of admitting she'd been approached, that she'd even considered the meeting, felt like weakness, like proof that she couldn't handle this on her own. At midnight, she got out of bed and went to the library. The crumpled paper was still in her coat pocket. She smoothed it out, read the address again. She wouldn't go. Obviously, she wouldn't go. But she didn't throw it away either. Morning came gray and cold. Rose arrived at 8, made breakfast, and asked if Serafina wanted help organizing the nursery. Serafina said yes, grateful for the distraction, and they spent the morning sorting through linens and baby clothes and furniture catalogs. By noon, Rose had left. The house was quiet again. Serafina stood in the kitchen, staring at the clock. 12:15. If she wanted to make the meeting, she'd need to leave now. She told herself she wasn't going, told herself it was dangerous, stupid, exactly the kind of decision that would get her killed, or worse. But she also told herself that knowledge was power, that understanding what Costello wanted might give her leverage. That going didn't mean agreeing to anything, it just meant listening. She grabbed her coat and keys and walked out to the car. One of the guards stepped forward. "Mrs. Blackthorne, where are you headed?" "Into town. Errands." "Would you like an escort?" "No, I'm fine." He hesitated, then stepped back. "Be safe." She drove north toward Beacon and tried not to think about what she was doing. The restaurant was small, upscale, the kind of place where business deals happened over wine and handshakes. Serafina walked in at exactly 2 p.m. and saw Vincent Costello waiting at a corner table. He stood when she approached. Mid-50s, silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of face that looked reasonable until you noticed the eyes, sharp and calculating and entirely without warmth. "Mrs. Blackthorne," he said, offering his hand. "Thank you for coming." She didn't shake it. "I'm not here to make deals, I'm here to listen." "Fair enough?" He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." She sat. A waiter appeared, offered menus. Vincent ordered wine. Serafina asked for water. "You're pregnant," Vincent said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes." "Congratulations, Dorian must be thrilled." "What do you want, Mr. Costello?" He smiled. "Direct. I like that." "All right. I'll be direct too. Your husband is sitting on territory that doesn't belong to him. Manhattan, parts of Brooklyn, operations in New Jersey. My family had stakes in those markets before Dorian's father muscled us out. I want them back." "That's between you and Dorian." "It was. But now you're in the picture. And you're not just his wife, you're his vulnerability. He's got guards on your house, people tracking your movements. He's distracted, worried. That's not like him." "So what? You think I'm going to help you hurt him?" "No," Vincent said calmly. "I think you're going to help yourself. You left him, Serafina. You walked out. That takes guts. But walking out doesn't solve your problem. You're still tied to him, still dependent on his security, his resources, his goodwill. What if I could offer you independence, real independence?" "How?" "By making sure Dorian can't touch you, by guaranteeing your safety, your child's safety, without any strings attached. You give me information, his operations, his contacts, his vulnerabilities, and I give you freedom. You disappear, new identity, new life. Anywhere you want." Serafina stared at him. "You're asking me to betray my husband. I'm asking you to choose yourself. Dorian doesn't love you. You know that. He married you for legitimacy, for alliances. You're a tool to him. But you don't have to be." The words landed like stones, because they were true. At least they'd been true 2 months ago, standing in that penthouse, listening to Dorian talk about her like she was inventory. But something had shifted since then. Not in Dorian. Maybe in her. She'd walked away because she deserved more than indifference. But betraying him, helping his enemies, using their child as leverage, that wasn't freedom. That was just another cage. "No," she said. Vincent's expression didn't change. "You sure? This is a limited time offer." "I'm sure. Even knowing he'll never give you what you want? Even knowing you'll always be the woman he married for convenience, not love? Even knowing that?" She stood. Vincent stayed seated, studying her with something that might have been respect or might have been disappointment. "If you change your mind," he said, "you know how to reach me." Serafina walked out without answering. She made it halfway to the car before her hands started shaking. She sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the adrenaline crash. She'd just met with Vincent Costello, Dorian's enemy, a man who'd probably ordered violence, extortion, worse. And she'd done it alone, without telling anyone, without backup. If Dorian found out, he'd lose his mind. If Marcus found out, he'd probably lock her in the house and throw away the key. She pulled out her phone, stared at Dorian's contact, and almost called him. But what would she say? "I met with Costello because I wanted to see if there was another option. I wanted to know if I could escape you completely." She put the phone away and drove back to Ravenshade. The guard at the gate waved her through without comment. She parked, walked inside, and found Rose in the kitchen, preparing dinner. You look pale, Rose said. You feeling all right? Just tired. You should rest. The baby. I know. I will. She went upstairs, lay down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling until the light outside turned dark. She'd made her choice. She'd said no to Costello. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she just felt trapped. At midnight, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Serafina bolted upright, heart pounding. Downstairs, she heard shouting, men's voices, harsh and overlapping, and then a gunshot, sharp and unmistakable. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, and ran to the bedroom door, locked it, pushed the dresser in front of it with strength she didn't know she had. Another gunshot, closer. She crouched behind the bed, phone pressed to her ear. There are men in my house, she whispered to the dispatcher. Ravenshade House, Hudson Valley. They have guns. Please. The bedroom door shook. Someone was trying to force it open. Serafina Blackthorne, a voice shouted. Male, unfamiliar, accent she couldn't place. Open the door. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. She didn't answer. The door shook again, harder, wood splintering. Then, from somewhere downstairs, Marcus's voice, Federal agents, drop your weapons. More gunfire, shouting, chaos. Serafina stayed behind the bed, arms wrapped around her knees, and waited. Silence. Then footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. A knock on the door. Serafina, it's Marcus. You can come out. She didn't move. Serafina, they're gone. You're safe. Slowly she stood, pushed the dresser aside, unlocked the door. Marcus stood in the hallway, blood on his shirt, gun still in his hand. Behind him, two of Dorian's guards were zip-tying a man on the floor, one of the intruders, barely conscious. Are you hurt? Marcus asked. She shook her head. Good. Stay here. We're clearing the house. He walked away. Serafina stood in the doorway, staring at the man on the floor. He was young, maybe 25, and he was staring back at her with something that looked like fear. Who sent you? She asked. He didn't answer. Was it Costello? Still nothing. Marcus returned, grabbed the man by the collar, and dragged him down the hallway. We'll find out, he said over his shoulder. Don't worry. By dawn, the house was secure. 3 intruders captured, 1 dead, 2 of Dorian's guards injured but alive. The police came, took statements, and left. Silas Merrick arrived with a team of lawyers. Rose showed up, saw the broken windows and bloodstains, and immediately started making coffee like that was the only thing she knew how to control. And Dorian arrived just after sunrise, stepping out of a helicopter that landed on the front lawn like he owned the sky itself. He walked into the house, past the guards, and the lawyers, and the shattered glass, and found Serafina sitting in the library, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. He stopped in the doorway. Their eyes met. Are you hurt? He asked, and his voice was rough, like he'd been screaming. No. The baby? Fine. He crossed the room, knelt in front of her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Dorian Blackthorne looked genuinely afraid. I'm sorry, he said, and Serafina, exhausted and shaken and still carrying the weight of everything that had just happened, started to cry. Dorian didn't touch her. He just knelt there, close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the way his hands were shaking slightly before he clenched them into fists. Serafina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and forced herself to stop crying. Crying felt like weakness, and she couldn't afford weakness right now. They came for me, she said, and her voice was flat, drained. They broke into my house and came for me. I know. This is your world, Dorian. This is what you brought into my life. He flinched like she'd slapped him. I know that too. Knowing doesn't fix it. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. We need to talk, both of you. Dorian stood, helped Serafina to her feet even though she didn't ask for help, and they followed Marcus into the dining room. The table was covered with photographs, documents, a laptop showing security footage. 3 of Dorian's senior people were already there, his head of intelligence, his lawyer, and a woman Serafina had never seen before, sharp-eyed and silent. Marcus gestured to the photographs. The 3 men we captured aren't talking yet, but we've identified them. 2 are low-level muscle from the Costello family. The 3rd is freelance, a gun for hire out of Boston. Serafina's stomach dropped. Costello! Everyone turned to look at her. You know something? Marcus asked, and his tone was too careful, too controlled. She should have lied, should have kept her mouth shut. But the exhaustion and the fear and the weight of everything that had just happened stripped away her ability to deflect. I met with Vincent Costello yesterday, she said. The room went silent. Dorian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very, very cold. You did what? He asked, and his voice was so quiet it was almost worse than shouting. He sent someone to approach me in Cold Spring, gave me an address. I went to see what he wanted. And you didn't think to tell anyone? Marcus said, incredulous. I didn't think it mattered. I told him no. I walked out. I thought that was the end of it. Dorian was staring at her like she was a stranger. What did he offer you? Independence, a new identity. He wanted information about your operations in exchange for getting me out. And you said no. Of course I said no. But you considered it, Dorian said, and it wasn't a question. Serafina met his eyes. For about 5 seconds, yes. I considered it. Because I was angry and scared, and I wanted to know if there was a way out of this that didn't involve your guards and your world and your enemies breaking into my house in the middle of the night. So you met with a man who's been trying to kill me for the last 3 years. I met with him to listen, that's all. I didn't give him anything. I didn't promise him anything. I told him to go to hell, and I left. Marcus rubbed his face. This is bad. This is really bad. Why? Serafina asked. I said no. I didn't help him. Because now he knows you're willing to meet, the intelligence officer said. She was younger than Serafina expected, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. He knows you're conflicted. He knows there's a wedge between you and Dorian, and even if you turned him down, he can use that. He can tell his people you're a potential asset. He can send more approaches, more pressure, or... She paused. He can decide you're too risky to leave alive. The words hung in the air like smoke. You think last night was retaliation? Serafina asked. Maybe. Or it was a kidnapping attempt that went sideways when our people responded faster than they expected. Either way, you've made yourself a bigger target. Dorian hadn't moved. He was still staring at Serafina, and she couldn't read his expression at all. Everyone out, he said. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. He gestured to the others, and they filed out, closing the door behind them. Serafina and Dorian stood on opposite sides of the table, the photographs and evidence scattered between them like wreckage. I didn't betray you, she said. You met with my enemy without telling me. Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Like what? Like someone who just found out his pregnant wife had a secret meeting with a man who wants him dead? Like someone who thinks he owns me, Serafina snapped. I went to that meeting because I wanted to know if I had options, Dorian. Not because I wanted to destroy you, because I wanted to know if I could build a life that wasn't defined by your choices, your enemies, your world. And what did you find out? That there's no way out. That even if I run, even if I change my name and disappear, I'm still connected to you. Because of this baby, because of this marriage, because you'll never let me go. Dorian's jaw tightened. You're right, I won't. Why? She demanded. Why does it matter so much? You didn't want me before. You barely noticed I existed. So why now? Why can't you just let me walk away? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, because I was wrong. Serafina laughed, bitter and sharp. That's it? You were wrong? Yes. That's not enough, Dorian. I know it's not. He dragged a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely lost. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I treated you like you didn't matter, like you were just another piece of the machine. And I know that walking into your life now, after everything, and asking you to trust me is insane. But I'm asking anyway. Why should I? Because those men came here to hurt you, to take you. And if I hadn't sent Marcus, if I hadn't kept guards on this property, you'd be gone right now. You and the baby. So maybe I'm controlling, maybe I'm overbearing, But I'm also the only thing standing between you and people who see you as leverage, not a person. Serafina wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she could protect herself, that she didn't need him. But the broken windows downstairs and the bloodstains on the floor said otherwise. I can't do this anymore, she said quietly. I can't keep living in fear, waiting for the next attack, wondering if every stranger I see is going to pull a gun. I can't raise a child like this. Then come back to Manhattan. Let me protect you properly. No. Serafina? I said no. I'm not going back to that penthouse. I'm not going back to being invisible. You wouldn't be invisible? Wouldn't I? She crossed her arms. What's changed, Dorian? Really? You're scared now because someone tried to take me. But what happens when the threat goes away? What happens when the baby's born and things settle down? Do you go back to ignoring me? Do I go back to being the obedient wife who doesn't ask questions? He didn't answer. That's what I thought, she said. She walked out, leaving him standing alone in the dining room. The house was a crime scene for the next 48 hours. Police technicians photographed everything, collected evidence, asked the same questions over and over. Serafina gave her statement 3 times, to local police, to state investigators, to someone from the FBI who showed up unannounced and asked pointed questions about Dorian's business dealings. She told them the truth. Mostly. She left out the meeting with Costello. That felt like opening a door she couldn't close, and she was too tired to deal with the consequences. Rose stayed through it all, cooking meals no one ate, cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, just to have something to do. The contractor boarded up the broken windows. The guards doubled their shifts. And Dorian stayed. Not in the house. Serafina had made that boundary clear. But he took a room at a bed and breakfast in Cold Spring, 10 minutes away, and showed up every morning like he was reporting for duty. He didn't push, didn't demand access, just sat in the kitchen, drank coffee, and asked if she needed anything. It was unsettling. Why are you still here? She asked on the 3rd day, watching him read through security reports at her kitchen table. Because you're not safe yet. Your people are handling it. I don't trust anyone else with this. You don't trust anyone with anything, she said. He looked up, met her eyes. I trust Marcus. I trust my intelligence team. But this is different. This is you. I'm not special, Dorian. I'm just another problem you're trying to solve. You're not a problem. Then what am I? He set down the papers. You're the person I failed, and I'm trying to figure out how not to fail you again. Serafina didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She just poured herself tea and sat across from him, and they stayed like that, until Marcus called with an update. Gotts. The update was bad. The freelance gunman had talked. Not willingly. Marcus didn't specify how they'd gotten him to talk. And Serafina didn't ask, but he'd confirmed the attack was ordered by the Costello family. The goal had been kidnapping, not murder. They wanted Serafina alive, wanted to use her as leverage to force Dorian into ceding territory. But here's the problem, Marcus said, standing in the library with his arms crossed. Costello didn't just send 3 guys on a whim. He had inside information. He knew your security rotation. He knew which entrance was least protected. He knew exactly when to hit. Dorian's expression went dark. You're saying we have a leak. I'm saying someone on your payroll sold you out. The room went cold. Who? Dorian asked. We're working on it, but it's someone with access to your security protocols, someone close. Serafina felt her stomach twist. How close? Marcus hesitated. Close enough to know Serafina's schedule. Close enough to know she went into Cold Spring alone that day. The implication was clear. Someone in Dorian's inner circle had betrayed him, and they'd used Serafina to do it. Find them, Dorian said, and his voice was ice. I don't care what it takes. Find them. Marcus nodded and left. Serafina stood by the window, staring out at the frozen grounds. You think it's someone you trust? It has to be. Low-level people don't have that kind of access. Who? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. It took 2 days. 2 days of interviews, surveillance reviews, financial audits. 2 days of Dorian barely sleeping, barely eating, running his organization like a scalpel looking for infection. And then Marcus found it. Serafina was in the nursery, assembling a crib with Rose's help, when Dorian appeared in the doorway. His face was ashen. "We need to talk," he said. Rose took one look at him and quietly left the room. "What happened?" Serafina asked. "It was Leo." Leo, Dorian's cousin. The man who'd been at the penthouse that night, the night Serafina overheard them talking about her like she was livestock. Leo, who'd always been polite to her face, always smiled and made small talk at family dinners. "What about him?" she asked, though she already knew, already felt the sick weight of it settling in her chest. "He's the one who gave Costello the information. He's been feeding them intelligence for months, security protocols, business deals, everything." Dorian's hands were shaking. "He's family, Serafina. I trusted him. I brought him into the inner circle because he's blood, and he sold me out." "Why?" "Money. Costello offered him a percentage of whatever territory he could help them take. Leo's been gambling, racking up debts. He needed cash, and he didn't care who he hurt to get it." Serafina sat down on the floor, suddenly too tired to stand. "He knew about the baby. He knew I was here." "Yes." "So he told Costello where to find me. He told them when to attack." Dorian nodded, and his expression was murderous. "He put you in danger. He put our child in danger, for money." "Where is he now?" "Marcus has him." Serafina didn't ask what that meant. She didn't want to know. "I'm going to handle this," Dorian said, "but I wanted you to know first. You deserve to know." She looked up at him. "What are you going to do?" "What I have to." "Dorian, he tried to get you killed, Serafina. He betrayed his own family. There's no coming back from that." She knew he was right, knew that in Dorian's world, betrayal like this had only one outcome. But the idea of it, of violence, of blood, of more death, made her feel sick. "I don't want to know the details," she said quietly. "Just make it stop. Make all of this stop." Dorian crouched in front of her, and for the first time he reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, steady, and she hated how much she wanted to hold on. "I will," he said. "I promise." Leo was gone by morning. Serafina didn't ask where. Marcus didn't volunteer the information. Dorian came back to the house at dawn, looking like he hadn't slept, and sat in the kitchen while Rose made him coffee he didn't drink. "It's done," he said. Serafina nodded. She was sitting across from him, hands wrapped around her own mug, and she felt numb. Not shocked, not horrified, just empty. "Costello's going to retaliate," she said. "Probably." "So this doesn't end. It just keeps going." Dorian didn't deny it. "I can't live like this," Serafina said, and her voice cracked. "I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for the next attack, the next betrayal. I can't raise a child in a world where family kills family for money." "I know. Then what are we supposed to do?" He looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Doubt. Real, raw doubt. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm not letting you go, and I'm not letting anyone hurt you again. So we figure it out. Together." "We're not together, Dorian. We're just two people trapped in the same nightmare." "Then let's stop being trapped." She almost laughed. "How?" "By ending it. Not the marriage, the war. I go to Costello, I negotiate. I give him some of what he wants. Territory, access, money. Whatever it takes to get him to back off. He'll see that as weakness. Maybe. Or maybe he'll see it as pragmatism. He wanted leverage over me. He wanted to force my hand. Well, he's done it. So I give him a deal, we both walk away alive, and you get to raise our child without looking over your shoulder every 5 minutes. Serafina stared at him. "You'd give up territory? Power? For me?" "For you. For the baby. For the chance to stop living like this." She wanted to believe him, but trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. "What if he says no?" she asked. "What if he wants more?" "Then I'll give him more, until there's nothing left to give." "And then what? You lose everything and blame me for it?" "No," Dorian said, and his voice was steady, certain. "Then I lose everything and we start over, somewhere else. Somewhere he can't reach us." It was insane. The idea of Dorian Blackthorne, heir to a criminal empire, a man who'd spent his entire life accumulating power, walking away from it all was insane. But he looked like he meant it. "I need time," Serafina said. "I need to think." Take all the time you need. Just don't leave. Not yet. She nodded. He stood, started to walk out, then stopped. I know you don't trust me, he said, and I know I haven't earned it, but I'm going to. Even if it takes the rest of my life, I'm going to prove to you that you matter, not because of the baby, not because of strategy, because you're you. He left before she could respond. Serafina sat in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the window, and wondered if people could really change. If Dorian could become someone different, if she could survive long enough to find out. The meeting with Costello was set for 3 days later, neutral ground in a hotel conference room in Albany. Dorian wanted Serafina to stay at Ravenshade surrounded by guards, but she refused. If you're negotiating my safety, I deserve to be there, she said. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. At least this way I'll know what's happening. He didn't like it, but he agreed. They drove to Albany in a convoy, 2 SUVs, 6 guards, Marcus in the lead vehicle. Serafina sat next to Dorian in the back seat, watching the winter landscape blur past, trying to calm the knot of anxiety in her chest. What if this doesn't work, she asked. Then we go to Plan B. What's Plan B? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. She almost smiled. That's not reassuring. I'm not a reassuring person. No, you're not. They arrived at the hotel an hour before the meeting. Marcus swept the conference room for bugs, checked the exits, positioned guards at every entrance. Dorian sat at the head of the table, hands folded, expression unreadable. Serafina sat beside him, trying to look calm. Vincent Costello arrived exactly on time, flanked by 2 men in suits who looked like they could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. He smiled when he saw Serafina. Mrs. Blackthorne, he said, I'm surprised to see you here. I wanted to hear this myself, she said. Fair enough. He sat across from Dorian, unbuttoned his jacket, and leaned back. So, you wanted to talk? I'm offering you a deal, Dorian said. You back off my family. No more attacks, no more surveillance, no more attempts to use my wife as leverage. And I'll cede the Brooklyn waterfront operations. Full territory transfer, clean handoff. Costello raised an eyebrow. That's generous. It's pragmatic. What's the catch? No catch? You get the territory. I get peace. We both walk away. Costello studied him, then laughed. You must really love her. Dorian's expression didn't change. Do we have a deal or not? Let me think about it. Costello pulled out his phone, typed something, and set it on the table. I'll need to consult with my people. Give me 24 hours. You have 12. Costello smiled. Always negotiating. Fine. 12 hours. I'll call you. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. His men followed. The room was silent. That went better than I expected, Marcus said. Dorian didn't respond. He was staring at the phone Costello had left on the table. He left his phone, Serafina said. No, Dorian said quietly. He left a bug. Marcus grabbed the phone, examined it, then swore. He's recording us. Which means he heard everything we said after he left, Dorian said. He's playing us. This whole meeting was just to see how desperate I am. So what do we do? Serafina asked. Dorian stood, grabbed the phone, and crushed it under his heel. We go home, and we prepare for war. At them. They made it halfway back to Ravenshade before the first gunshot shattered the rear window. The convoy swerved. Marcus shouted into his radio. Dorian shoved Serafina down onto the floor, covering her body with his as bullets tore through the SUV. Stay down, he yelled. The driver accelerated, weaving through traffic. Behind them, 2 black sedans were gaining, windows down, guns firing. One of the escort SUVs tried to block them and took a barrage of gunfire, spinning out and crashing into the guardrail. We're not going to make it, the driver shouted. Marcus pulled his gun. Take the next exit. We'll lose them in town. They careened off this highway, tires screaming, and plunged into a maze of side streets. The sedans followed. More gunfire. A bullet hit the driver's side mirror, glass exploding inward. Serafina was shaking, her hands pressed against her stomach, trying to protect the baby from an impact she couldn't control. Dorian held her, his body a shield, and she realized with cold clarity that he would die for her if it came to that. The thought should have comforted her. Instead, it terrified her. They turned a corner and the lead sedan clipped their bumper, sending them spinning. The SUV hit a parked car, airbags deploying, and everything went white and loud and wrong. When Serafina's vision cleared, she was upside down. The SUV had flipped. Blood was running down her face from a cut on her forehead. Dorian was beside her, unconscious, his head against the shattered window. "Dorian," she whispered, then louder. "Dorian!" He didn't move. Outside footsteps, voices, the sound of a car door opening. Someone grabbed her arm, started pulling her through the broken window. She fought, kicked, but they were stronger. They dragged her onto the pavement, and she looked up into the face of a man she didn't recognize. "Vincent sends his regards," the man said. Then everything went black. God. Serafina woke in darkness. Her head was pounding. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back, and she was sitting on a cold concrete floor. She blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light, and realized she was in some kind of warehouse, empty, echoing. The smell of oil and rust thick in the air. Across the room, Vincent Costello sat in a folding chair watching her. "Welcome back," he said. Serafina's heart was racing, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Where am I?" "Somewhere your husband won't find you. Not for a while, anyway." "What do you want?" "The same thing I've always wanted. Territory. Power." Dorian's head on a plate. He stood, walked closer. "But I'm willing to negotiate, if you cooperate." "I'm not helping you." "Not even to save your baby?" The words hit like a punch. Serafina's hands instinctively moved toward her stomach, but the zip ties bit into her wrists. "You wouldn't," she said. "I wouldn't want to," Costello said, "but I will if you force my hand. So here's the deal. You call Dorian. You tell him to meet me, alone, no guards, no Marcus. He comes, he surrenders, and I let you go. Simple. He'll never surrender. Then I guess we'll find out how much he values your life." Costello pulled out a phone, held it in front of her face. "Call him." Serafina stared at the phone. Her mind was racing, trying to find an angle, a way out. But there wasn't one. She was tied up, alone, pregnant, and completely at Costello's mercy. She thought about Dorian, unconscious in the wreckage. Thought about Marcus and the guards, probably dead or dying. Thought about the baby inside her, small and fragile and entirely dependent on her making the right choice. And she realized there was no right choice. There was only survival. "Fine," she said. "I'll call him." Costello smiled and unlocked the phone. Serafina took it with shaking hands, dialed Dorian's number, and waited. He answered on the first ring. "Serafina, I'm alive," she said, cutting him off. "But I'm with Costello. He wants you to come alone. No guards, no backup. Just you." There was a long pause, then, "Where?" Costello leaned in and whispered an address. Serafina repeated it. "If you bring anyone," Costello called out, loud enough for Dorian to hear, "she dies. You have 1 hour." He took the phone back and ended the call. Serafina sat there, trembling, and wondered if she'd just signed Dorian's death warrant, or her own. Dorian stood in the wreckage of the SUV, blood running from a cut above his eye, phone pressed to his ear. The line was dead. Costello had hung up. Marcus was beside him, limping, his arm hanging at an odd angle. "You're not seriously considering this." "I don't have a choice. It's a trap. You know it's a trap." "I know." Dorian wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand. "But he has Serafina. He has my child, so I'm going." "Then I'm coming with you." "No," he said alone. "And you believe him? You think Costello is going to play fair?" Dorian turned, and his eyes were hard, empty of everything except focus. "I think if I don't go, he'll kill her, and I'm not letting that happen." Marcus grabbed his good arm. "This is suicide, Dorian. You walk in there alone, you're not walking out." "Probably not." "So what's the plan? You die and she dies anyway?" "The plan," Dorian said quietly, "is I buy her time. I keep Costello talking, keep him focused on me, and you find her." Marcus stared at him. "You want me to track her while you're playing hostage?" "That's exactly what I want. You've got an hour. Use it." "I've got a broken arm and half our team is dead." "Then call everyone else. Pull every resource we have. I don't care what it costs." Dorian's voice didn't waver. "Find her, Marcus. That's the only thing that matters." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Dorian's face stopped him. He nodded once, pulled out his phone, and started making calls. Dorian walked toward the remaining SUV, every muscle in his body screaming, adrenaline the only thing keeping him upright. He climbed into the driver's seat, entered the address Costello had given into the GPS, and started driving. The warehouse was 40 minutes away, in an industrial zone near the river. He had no weapons, no backup, no plan except to walk through the door and hope Marcus could work a miracle. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, TikTok. Dorian didn't respond. He just drove faster. But Serafina was shivering. The warehouse was freezing, her breath coming out in visible clouds, and the zip ties were cutting into her wrists hard enough that she'd lost feeling in her fingers. Costello was pacing in front of her, checking his watch every few minutes, impatient. "He's going to be late," one of Costello's men said. Tall, shaved head, scar across his throat. "He'll come," Costello said. "He's stupid enough to think he can save her." "What if he brings people? Then we kill her in front of him and disappear. Simple." Serafina's stomach twisted. She forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly, tried to think through the panic. She needed to stay calm, needed to stay sharp. The baby, she could still feel the baby moving, small flutters against her ribs. That meant they were both still alive. That meant there was still a chance. "How far along are you?" Costello asked suddenly, looking at her. 5 months. "Boy or girl?" "I don't know. You didn't want to find out?" "I wanted it to be a surprise." Costello smiled, and it was almost kind, almost human. "I have 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 girl. The youngest just turned 6. He crouched in front of her. "I don't want to hurt you, Serafina. I really don't. But business is business, and your husband has something I want. So take it. Let me go and take whatever you want." It's not that simple. Dorian's built his whole empire on control, on never backing down. If I just take what I want, he'll spend the rest of his life trying to take it back. But if I break him, if I take everything, including you, he'll know he's finished, and he'll stay finished. You think killing him will solve your problems? I think removing him from the board will open up opportunities. And yes, that includes killing him. Serafina met his eyes. He's going to fight you. You know that, right? He won't just walk in here and surrender. Then he'll die fighting. Either way, I win. The sound of a car engine cut through the silence. Costello stood, gestured to his men. Showtime. 2 of them grabbed Serafina, hauled her to her feet. She bit back a cry as pain shot through her shoulders. They dragged her to the center of the warehouse, into a pool of light from a single overhead bulb, and forced her to her knees. The warehouse door opened. Dorian walked in. He looked like hell, blood on his face, his shirt torn, moving like every step hurt. But his expression was calm, controlled, and when his eyes found Serafina, something in them cracked. "Let her go," he said. Costello stepped forward, hands in his pockets, relaxed. "You came alone. I'm impressed. I did what you asked. Now let her go." "Not yet. First we talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "I disagree." Costello circled Dorian slowly, like a shark. "You've been a problem for me for a long time. You and your family, always in the way, always taking what doesn't belong to you. I've tried negotiating. I've tried patience. None of it worked, so now we're here. You want the territories? Take them. You want the operations? They're yours. Just let her go." See, that's the thing. I don't just want your business. I want you gone, completely, dead or disappeared. I don't care which, because as long as you're breathing, you're a threat. Dorian didn't flinch. "Then kill me. But let her walk out of here first." "No deal. She's not part of this. She became part of this the moment she married you." Costello stopped in front of him. "You made her a target, Dorian. You put that baby in danger. So don't stand here and pretend you're the hero. You're the reason she's on her knees right now." Serafina saw Dorian's jaw tighten, saw the flicker of guilt cross his face. And she realized Costello was right. This was Dorian's world. His choices. His enemies. She'd walked into it willingly, but she was paying the price for his sins. "Let her go," Dorian said again, and his voice was raw. "Please." Costello laughed. "You're begging. I never thought I'd see the day." "I'll give you anything. Everything. Just let her go." "Anything?" Yes. Costello pulled a gun from his coat, checked the chamber, and pointed it at Serafina's head. Then kneel. Dorian didn't move. Kneel, Costello repeated, or I pull the trigger. Slowly Dorian sank to his knees. Serafina's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She wanted to scream at him to run, to fight, to do anything except kneel there like he'd already lost. But she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Good, Costello said. He lowered the gun slightly, smiled. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over every asset, every territory, every operation you control. You're going to do it in front of witnesses, legally binding, no loopholes, and then you're going to disappear, leave the country, change your name. I don't care, but you're done. And Serafina? She stays with me, insurance, to make sure you don't come back. No. No? Costello raised the gun again. You don't get to negotiate anymore, Dorian. You lost. Accept it. Dorian looked at Serafina. Their eyes met across the warehouse, and she saw everything he couldn't say. The apology, the regret, the desperate hope that she'd survive this even if he didn't. I love you, he said. The words landed like a gunshot. Serafina stared at him, stunned. In 6 months of marriage, he'd never said those words. Not once. And now, kneeling on a concrete floor with a gun pointed at her head, he was saying them like they were the last true thing he had left. Dorian, she started, but Costello cut her off. How touching. But it doesn't change anything. He cocked the gun. Sign the papers or she dies. You have 5 seconds. 5. The warehouse door exploded inward. Marcus came through first, gun raised, followed by 8 men in tactical gear. They spread out, weapons trained on Costello's people, moving with the precision of a trained strike team. Drop the gun, Marcus shouted. Costello didn't drop it. He pressed the barrel against Serafina's temple instead. Take one more step and she's dead. Everyone froze. You're surrounded, Marcus said. There's no way out of this. There's always a way out. Costello's voice was calm, almost amused. You shoot me, I shoot her. Your people shoot my people, we all die. Or, he paused, you let me walk out of here and nobody has to bleed today. Not happening. Then I guess we're at an impasse. Dorian was still on his knees, his eyes locked on Costello. You want me, not her. Let her go and I'll stay. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll disappear. Just let her go. You're not in a position to bargain. Neither are you. Dorian's voice was quiet, deadly. You pull that trigger, you lose your leverage, and my people will tear you apart. Costello's finger twitched on the trigger. Serafina closed her eyes. Every muscle in her body braced for the impact. Then Dorian moved. He launched himself forward faster than anyone expected and slammed into Costello. The gun went off, deafening in the enclosed space, and Serafina felt the bullet whip past her ear. Dorian and Costello hit the ground, grappling, and everything erupted into chaos. Gunfire, shouting, Marcus and his team engaging Costello's men. Serafina threw herself sideways, away from the fight, her hands still zip-tied behind her back. Someone grabbed her, started dragging her toward the door. One of Marcus's men, she realized, shouting something she couldn't hear over the noise. She looked back and saw Dorian on top of Costello, fist swinging, blood spraying. Costello got a hand on the gun, tried to bring it up, and Dorian slammed his wrist against the concrete until the weapon skittered away. Then one of Costello's men shot Dorian in the shoulder. He went down hard, clutching the wound, and Costello scrambled to his feet. He grabbed the gun, aimed it at Dorian's head. Marcus shot him. The bullet caught Costello in the chest, spinning him around. He stumbled, fell, and didn't get up. The warehouse went quiet except for the ringing in everyone's ears. Marcus crossed to Dorian, helped him sit up. You're hit. I'm fine, Dorian said through gritted teeth. Where's Serafina? I'm here, she called from the doorway. The guard had cut her zip ties, and she was running back into the warehouse, ignoring the bodies and the blood and the danger. She dropped to her knees beside Dorian, her hands shaking as she pressed them against his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. You're an idiot. You could have been killed. So could you. I know, but... Her voice broke. You said you loved me. I meant it. Tears were streaming down her face now, cutting tracks through the dirt and blood. You can't just say that and then almost die. I didn't plan it that way. She laughed, or maybe sobbed. She couldn't tell anymore. We need to get you to a hospital. We need to get you out of here, Dorian corrected. He looked up at Marcus. Costello? Dead. The others? 3 down, 2 surrendered, 1 ran. Marcus gestured to his team. We'll clean this up. You need to go. Dorian nodded, tried to stand, and nearly collapsed. Serafina caught him, or tried to. He was too heavy, too hurt, and Marcus had to help. Together, they got him to the SUV. Barmeet. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Serafina sat in the back with Dorian's head in her lap, her hands pressed against his shoulder while Marcus drove like he was trying to break the sound barrier. Dorian kept drifting in and out of consciousness, his skin pale, his breathing shallow. Stay with me, Serafina whispered. Don't you dare leave me now. His eyes flickered open. Not planning to. Good, because I'm not done being angry at you yet. He almost smiled. Fair. And when this is over, when you're healed, we're going to have a very long conversation about what happens next. About us. About the baby. About whether I can actually trust you. Okay? I'm serious, Dorian. I know. His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. I'll earn it. The trust. I promise. Serafina wanted to believe him, but promises felt cheap right now, fragile in the face of everything that had just happened. She just held his hand and kept pressure on the wound and prayed they'd make it to the hospital in time. They did. The ER doctors took Dorian straight into surgery. The bullet had gone clean through, missing the major arteries by inches, but he'd lost a lot of blood. Serafina waited in the hallway, still covered in his blood, shaking and exhausted and numb. A nurse brought her tea she didn't drink. Marcus showed up with fresh clothes and made her change in the bathroom. Silas Merrick arrived with legal documents, prepared to handle whatever fallout came from the warehouse. And Rose somehow appeared, took one look at Serafina, and pulled her into a hug that finally broke through the shock. You're safe, Rose murmured. You're both safe. Serafina clung to her and cried until there was nothing left. Why? Dorian woke up 12 hours later in a private room, groggy and disoriented. Serafina was asleep in the chair beside his bed, her head resting on the mattress, one hand still holding his. He watched her for a long time, memorizing the curve of her face, the way her hair fell across her cheek, the small bump of her stomach visible even through the loose sweater she was wearing. She'd stayed. Even after everything, she'd stayed. He didn't deserve it. He knew that. But he was going to spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted it. You're awake, a voice said from the doorway. Marcus stepped in, looking exhausted but alive. How are you feeling? Like I got shot. That's because you did. Marcus sat in the other chair. Costello's dead, his people scattered. The ones who didn't are in custody or dead. It's over. For now. Maybe for good. Word's already spreading that you took out Vincent Costello. People are going to think twice before coming after you. Dorian looked at Serafina. I don't want them thinking about me at all. I want out. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Out? As in out? As in I'm done. I'm walking away from the family business. All of it. You can't just walk away. Watch me. Dorian's voice was flat, final. I've spent my entire life in this world. It's cost me everything. My father, my cousin, almost my wife and child. I'm not doing it anymore. What are you going to do instead? Become a civilian? If that's what it takes. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll handle the transition. But you need to understand there are going to be people who won't accept this. People who'll see it as weakness. Let them. I don't care anymore. And if they come after you anyway, then I'll deal with it. But I'm not dragging Serafina and the baby into another war. I'm done. Marcus stood, clapped a hand on Dorian's good shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. He left. Serafina stirred, lifted her head. Her eyes opened, focused on Dorian, and she sat up fast. You're awake. Hey, how do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck, but I'm alive. Barely. She reached for his hand, held it tight. You scared me. I know, I'm sorry. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. She looked at him, really looked, and he could see her trying to decide whether to believe him, whether to take the risk, whether he was worth it. I heard what you told Marcus, she said quietly, about walking away. You were awake? For the last part. Did you mean it? Every word. Where would we go? Anywhere you want. Ravenshade, somewhere new, somewhere no one knows us. We'd figure it out. Serafina was quiet for a long time. Then, I don't know if I can forgive you yet, for everything that happened, for the life you brought me into. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to let me try. Try what? To be the husband you deserved from the beginning. To be a father. To be someone you don't have to be afraid of. Tears welled in her eyes again. I was never afraid of you, Dorian. I was afraid of losing myself, of becoming someone I didn't recognize. Then don't. Be exactly who you are, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to be anything else. She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his. This isn't going to be easy. I know. We have a lot to work through. I know that too. And if you ever make me feel invisible again, I'm gone. For good. Understood. She kissed him then, soft and tentative, and he felt something in his chest unclench for the first time in months. Maybe years. When she pulled back, she was almost smiling. We're a mess. Yeah, we are. But maybe that's okay. Maybe. Outside the window, snow was starting to fall again, soft and silent, covering the city in white. Inside the hospital room, Dorian and Serafina sat together in the quiet, holding on to each other like they were the only solid things left in the world. And for the first time since this nightmare started, Serafina thought they might actually survive it. 3 days later, Dorian was discharged. Marcus drove them back to Ravenshade in a new SUV, armored and secure, with 2 guards following behind. The house looked the same, stone and ivy and winter bare trees, but it felt different now, safer, like a place they could actually build a life. Rose had prepared the guest room for Dorian, fresh sheets and a fire already going. She didn't ask questions, just made soup and disappeared to give them space. That night, Serafina sat in the library while Dorian rested upstairs, staring at the flames and trying to process everything that had happened. The attack, the kidnapping, the warehouse, Dorian getting shot, Costello dying. It all felt surreal, like a nightmare she couldn't quite wake up from. But when she went upstairs to check on Dorian and found him sitting up in bed reading a book about pregnancy with a bemused expression, it felt real again. Tangible. You're reading that? She asked from the doorway. He looked up, almost sheepish. I don't know anything about babies, figured I should start learning. Serafina crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed. What have you learned so far? That I'm completely unprepared and probably going to screw this up. Join the club. He set the book aside. We're really doing this, aren't we? The whole domestic thing. Looks like it. I don't know how to do domestic. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Dorian reached for her hand, laced his fingers through hers. I meant what I said in the warehouse. I love you, Serafina. I don't know when it started. Maybe it's been there the whole time and I was too stupid to see it. But I do. And I'm going to keep saying it until you believe me. Serafina looked at their joined hands, at the wedding ring she'd left on the nightstand months ago and hadn't worn since. I want to believe you. But I need time. I need to see that this is real, that you're not just saying what you think I want to hear. Fair. He squeezed her hand. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, stood to leave, then stopped. Dorian? Yeah? Thank you for coming for me, for risking everything. You're my wife, and He paused. I should have been doing that from the beginning. She almost smiled. Yeah, you should have. She left him there and went to her own room, but for the first time in months, she didn't lock the door. Tatpant. Winter deepened. The days were short and cold, the nights longer. Dorian healed slowly, his shoulders stiff and aching, but functional. He spent his mornings on the phone, dismantling his empire piece by piece, selling off operations, severing ties, transferring assets to people he trusted to run things without him. It was harder than he'd expected. Letting go, walking away from the only life he'd ever known. But every time he saw Serafina reading in the library, walking through the gardens with Rose, her hand resting on the growing curve of her stomach, he knew he'd made the right choice. Marcus visited once a week, bringing updates and documents to sign. "People are talking," he said one afternoon. "They think you've gone soft." Let them think that. Some of them are getting ideas, testing boundaries, then shut them down. I am, but eventually someone's going to push too hard. Dorian looked at him. "Are you saying I should come back?" "I'm saying you should be prepared, just in case." "I'm not coming back, Marcus. That life is over. For now. For good." Marcus didn't argue, but the look in his eyes said he didn't believe it. Then Serafina's due date was April 15th. A spring baby, the doctor said, which felt impossibly far away and terrifyingly close at the same time. She and Dorian attended appointments together, watched ultrasounds together, argued about names together. It felt normal, fragile and strange, but normal. One evening in late February, they were sitting in the library after dinner when Serafina said, "I think we should renew our vows." Dorian looked up from the legal documents he'd been reviewing. "What?" "Our vows. The wedding was—" She paused, searching for the right word. "It was a transaction. We both know that. But if we're really doing this, if we're really trying to build something, I want it to mean something. I want to choose you, not because I have to, because I want to." Dorian set the papers aside. "When?" "After the baby's born, when things settle down, something small, just us and a few people who matter." "Okay. Okay?" "Yeah." He smiled, and it was genuine, warm. "I'd like that." Serafina smiled back, and for the first time since she'd walked out of his penthouse months ago, she felt like maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. But peace never lasted. On a cold March night, 2 weeks before her due date, Serafina woke to the sound of breaking glass. Not again. She sat up, heart pounding, and reached for the phone on her nightstand, dialed 911, then Dorian's room. He answered immediately. "What's wrong?" "Someone's in the house." "Stay there. Lock the door. I'm coming." She heard him moving, heard his door open, heard his footsteps in the hallway. Then she heard the gunshot. Serafina screamed, threw open her door, and saw Dorian on the floor, blood spreading across his chest. And standing over him, holding a gun, was someone she'd never expected to see again. Leo, Dorian's cousin, the man they'd thought was dead. "Surprise," Leo said, and smiled. Serafina couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her eyes were locked on Leo, alive, impossibly alive, standing over Dorian with a gun in his hand and blood on his shoes. "You're dead," she whispered. Leo laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that came from somewhere broken. That's what everyone was supposed to think. Marcus did a real convincing job with the cover story. Too bad it was all bullshit. Dorian was on the floor clutching his chest, blood seeping between his fingers. His face was white, his breathing ragged, but his eyes were open, focused on Leo with a hatred so pure it was almost tangible. "You set this up," Dorian said through gritted teeth. "All of it." "Not all of it. Costello was his own kind of stupid. But yeah, I helped things along. Fed him information, pointed him in the right direction. Told him exactly when and where to hit." Leo crouched down, still holding the gun, his face inches from Dorian's. "You want to know the best part? Marcus never killed me. I paid him to fake it, paid him more money than you've ever offered him, and he took it. Because loyalty? That's just a word, cousin. Everyone has a price." Serafina's mind was racing. Marcus. Marcus had betrayed them, the man who'd saved her in the warehouse, who'd driven Dorian to the hospital, who'd been Dorian's right hand for years. He'd been working with Leo the entire time. "Where is he?" Dorian asked, his voice barely more than a rasp. "Gone. Offshore account, new identity, probably drinking something expensive on a beach by now. He played his part perfectly. Even I was impressed." Leo stood, aimed the gun at Dorian's head. And now I finish mine. Wait, Serafina said, stepping forward. Leo's eyes flicked to her. Stay back. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I really do. See, as long as Dorian's alive, I'm a dead man. He'll hunt me. He'll never stop. So the only way I survive is if he doesn't. Then take me instead, Serafina said, and the words came out steady, cold. I'm the one carrying his child. I'm the leverage you need. Kill him and you get nothing. Keep me alive and you can negotiate with whoever takes over. Leo tilted his head, considering. You'd really bargain for his life? After everything he's put you through? Yes. Why? Because somewhere in the last 6 months, despite everything, she'd stopped seeing Dorian as the man who'd married her for convenience and started seeing him as the man who'd taken a bullet for her, who'd walked into a warehouse alone to save her, who'd looked at her in a hospital room and promised to spend the rest of his life proving he could be better. She didn't say any of that. She just said, because he's the father of my child, and I'm not letting you kill him in front of me. Leo studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You've got guts. I'll give you that. But here's the problem. I don't need leverage anymore. Costello's dead. Dorian's empire is in shambles. The territories are up for grabs, and me? I'm about to disappear with enough money to live like a king for the rest of my life. So killing him isn't about leverage. It's about tying up loose ends. He cocked the gun. Serafina moved without thinking. She grabbed the heavy brass candlestick from the hall table and swung it at Leo's head with everything she had. It connected with a sickening crack. Leo stumbled sideways, the gun going off, the bullet slamming into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Serafina swung again, catching him in the shoulder, and he went down hard, the gun skittering across the floor. She dove for it. Leo grabbed her ankle, yanked her back. She hit the floor stomach first and felt a sharp, tearing pain rip through her abdomen. She screamed, kicked at Leo's face, connected with his nose. Blood sprayed. He let go. She crawled toward the gun, her whole body screaming in pain, and her fingers closed around the grip just as Leo lunged at her. She rolled onto her back and fired. The shot hit Leo in the chest. He stopped, looked down at the blood spreading across his shirt, then looked at Serafina with something that might have been surprise or respect, or both. Didn't think you had it in you, he said. Then he collapsed. Serafina lay there, the gun still in her hands, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. The pain in her abdomen was getting worse, sharp and insistent, and when she looked down, she saw blood soaking through her nightgown. Dorian, she said, her voice breaking. He was crawling toward her, one hand pressed to his chest, his face gray. I'm here. Something's wrong. The baby... I know. Hold on. He pulled his phone from his pocket with shaking hands, dialed 911. His voice was calm, controlled, even though he looked like he was about to pass out. We need 2 ambulances at Ravenshade House, Hudson Valley. Gunshot wounds and a pregnant woman in distress. Yes, we're both bleeding. Yes, she's in labor. Just send everyone. He dropped the phone, reached for her hand. You're going to be okay. You don't know that. I do. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You're going to be okay. Serafina wanted to believe him, but the pain was unbearable now, waves of it crashing through her, and she could feel something shifting inside her, something wrong. The baby was coming. Too early, too fast. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. I'm scared. I know, but you're not alone. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Dorian squeezed her hand, and she held on like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. The EMTs arrived 6 minutes later. 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours. They loaded Serafina onto a stretcher, started an IV, asked questions she couldn't focus on. Dorian refused to get on his own stretcher until he saw them put Serafina in the ambulance. I'm riding with her, he said. Sir, you've been shot. You need... I'm riding with her, or I'm following in my own car. Your choice. The EMT looked at Dorian's bloody chest, his pale face, and sighed. Fine. Get in. They rode to the hospital with sirens screaming, Serafina's hand in Dorian's, both of them barely conscious. The EMT working on Serafina kept saying things like, heart rate's dropping, and we need to move faster, and every word made Dorian's chest tighten with a fear he couldn't control. Stay with me, he told Serafina. Her eyes fluttered open. I'm trying. Try harder. She almost laughed. Almost. Then another contraction hit and she screamed. Ma. The hospital was chaos. Doctors, nurses, bright lights, shouting. They pulled Serafina one direction, Dorian another. He tried to follow her, but someone, a nurse maybe, pushed him back. She needs surgery, emergency C-section. You can't go in there. Like hell I can't. Sir, you've been shot. You're losing blood. If you don't let us treat you, you're going to die. Dorian looked at the double doors where they'd taken Serafina, then back at the nurse. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to be there, to make sure she was okay. But he could barely stand. His vision was blurring at the edges, and if he collapsed now, he'd be useless to her. Fine, he said, but you tell me the second there's news, the second. I will. They led him to a surgical bay, cut off his shirt, started working on the bullet wound. He didn't feel any of it. He just stared at the ceiling and thought about Serafina, scared and alone and fighting for their child's life, and hated himself for not being able to protect her from this. Serafina woke up in a recovery room. The first thing she noticed was the silence. No beeping monitors, no shouting doctors, just quiet. The second thing she noticed was the pain, dull, aching, everywhere. The third thing was that her stomach felt different, smaller, empty. No, she whispered and tried to sit up. A nurse appeared at her side, gently pushing her back down. Mrs. Blackthorne, you need to rest. Where's my baby? Your son is in the NICU. He's small, only 4 pounds, but he's breathing on his own and his vitals are stable. The doctors are monitoring him closely. I want to see him. You will, but you need to recover first. You lost a lot of blood. The surgery? I don't care about the surgery. I want to see my son. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. I'll see what I can do, but you need to stay calm. Stress isn't good for you right now. Serafina didn't feel calm. She felt like she was coming apart at the seams, but she nodded, and the nurse left. 10 minutes later, a different nurse wheeled in a small incubator. Inside was a tiny, fragile baby, his skin almost translucent, wires and monitors attached to his chest. He was so small, so impossibly small. Can I hold him? Serafina asked. Not yet, but you can touch him. The nurse opened a small door in the side of the incubator. Serafina reached in, her hand trembling, and touched her son's tiny hand. His fingers curled around hers instinctively, and something in her chest broke open. Hi, she whispered. I'm your mom, and you're going to be okay. You hear me? You're going to be okay. The baby didn't respond, but his grip on her finger didn't loosen. Dorian woke up 4 hours later in a hospital bed, his chest wrapped in bandages, his arm hooked to an IV. The first thing he did was rip the IV out and try to stand. A nurse rushed in. Mr. Blackthorne, you need to stay in bed. Where's my wife? She's in recovery. The surgery went well. She's stable. And the baby? Your son is in the NICU. Premature. But the doctors are optimistic. Dorian sat back down, the relief so overwhelming it left him dizzy. I want to see them. You're not cleared to leave. I don't care. Get me a wheelchair. Now. The nurse looked like she wanted to argue, then thought better of it. She left and came back with a wheelchair. Dorian lowered himself into it, every movement sending pain shooting through his chest, and let the nurse wheel him down the hall. They stopped outside Serafina's room first. She was lying in bed, pale and exhausted, staring at the ceiling. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. You're alive, she said. So are you. The baby? I know. They told me. He's okay. He's so small, Dorian, so small. He's a fighter, like his mother. She laughed, but it came out as a sob. Dorian wheeled himself closer, took her hand. We're going to get through this. How? I don't know, but we will. They sat like that for a long time, holding hands in the sterile hospital room, two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. The NICU was on the 3rd floor. Dorian insisted on going, even though the nurses said he needed rest. They wheeled him and Serafina, who'd also refused to stay in bed, down together, side by side, and led them to the incubator where their son lay sleeping. He was so small. 4 pounds of fragile life, fighting to survive in a world that had already tried to kill him. Dorian stared at him, unable to speak. This was his son, his child. The result of a marriage that had started as a transaction and had somehow become the most important thing in his life. He needs a name, Serafina said quietly. Dorian had thought about this, had turned it over in his mind during the long nights when he couldn't sleep, when he was still trying to dismantle his empire and figure out how to be someone worth loving. Vale, he said. Vale Blackthorn. Your family before mine. Serafina looked at him, surprised. You mean that? Yes. Your family gave you strength, gave you the ability to walk away when I gave you nothing. He should carry that. He should know where he comes from. Tears streamed down Serafina's face. Okay. Vale, I like that. They sat there watching their son breathe, and for the first time in months, Dorian felt something close to peace. Vale stayed in the NICU for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of touch-and-go moments, of monitors beeping and doctors looking concerned and nurses whispering reassurances. But he was a fighter. Every day he got a little stronger, a little bigger, a little more alive. Dorian and Serafina took shifts sitting with him. Dorian read to him, absurd maybe, reading stock reports and legal briefs to a premature baby, but the nurses said he could hear their voices, and it helped. Serafina sang soft lullabies her grandmother had taught her, and watched Vale's tiny chest rise and fall in rhythm. During those 3 weeks, the outside world kept spinning. The police investigated the shooting at Ravenshade. Leo's body was taken to the morgue, his crimes catalogued, his betrayal documented. Marcus was gone, disappeared completely, no trace, no leads. Dorian's lawyers handled the fallout, spinning the story to minimize damage, and slowly, piece by piece, the empire Dorian had walked away from dissolved into nothing. He didn't care. All he cared about was the small room on the 3rd floor where his son was learning how to live. On the 22nd day, the doctor said Vale was strong enough to go home. Serafina cried. Dorian didn't, but it was close. They brought him back to Ravenshade on a cold April morning, the house scrubbed clean of any trace of violence, fresh flowers in every room courtesy of Rose. The nursery was ready, pale blue walls, a crib Dorian had assembled himself, a rocking chair by the window. Serafina sat in that chair with Vale in her arms, looking down at his tiny sleeping face, and felt something settle inside her. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet, but something close, something like hope. Dorian stood in the doorway watching them and realized this was the moment everything had been leading to. Not the empire, not the power, not the wealth or the violence or the endless struggle to stay on top. This, a woman and a child in a quiet room, safe and alive and his. Come here, Serafina said, looking up at him. He crossed the room, sat on the floor beside the rocking chair. She reached down, touched his face. Thank you, she said. For what? For choosing us, for walking away, for being here. I should have done it sooner. Maybe. But you're doing it now, that's what matters. Vale stirred in her arms, opened his eyes for a brief moment, dark, unfocused, searching, and then closed them again. He looks like you, Dorian said. He looks like both of us. He's perfect. He's ours. Dorian rested his head against the arm of the chair, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The months that followed were not easy. Vale was colicky, waking every 2 hours, screaming for reasons no one could decipher. Serafina was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline and sheer stubbornness. Dorian was learning how to be a father, which turned out to be infinitely harder than running a criminal empire, but they figured it out. Together. Rose helped, of course, cooking meals, doing laundry, offering wisdom when they were too tired to think straight. And slowly, Ravenshade stopped feeling like a refuge and started feeling like a home. Dorian sold the Manhattan penthouse, transferred the last of his business holdings to people he trusted, or at least people who wouldn't burn everything to the ground. He kept enough money to live comfortably, to give Vale a good life, but the rest he let go. It was strange, being ordinary, but it was also freeing. One evening in late summer, when Vale was 4 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Serafina found Dorian sitting on the back porch, staring at the sunset. She sat beside him, handed him a glass of wine. You okay? Yeah, just thinking. About? How different this is. A year ago, I was in a penthouse, running an empire, convinced that power was the only thing that mattered. And now I'm here, changing diapers and reading baby books, and worrying about whether we're using the right kind of formula. Do you miss it, the old life? He thought about it. Really thought about it. Then, no, I miss the certainty, maybe. Knowing exactly who I was and what I was supposed to do. But I don't miss the person I was. That person was empty. He had everything, and it meant nothing. And now? Now I have you, and Vale, and this house, and it's messy and exhausting, and nothing like I planned. But it's real. He looked at her. It matters. Serafina leaned her head on his shoulder. I never thought we'd get here. Neither did I. But I'm glad we did. Me too. They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Inside the house, Vale was sleeping peacefully in his crib, safe and warm. And for the first time since they'd met, Serafina and Dorian weren't husband and wife by contract, by obligation, by strategy. They were husband and wife because they'd chosen each other, in spite of everything, because of everything. And that was enough. The renewal of vows happened in October, exactly 1 year after Serafina had walked out of the penthouse. They held it in the garden at Ravenshade, just a handful of people. Rose, Silas Merrick, a few close friends Serafina had reconnected with, and Vale, who slept through the entire ceremony in Rose's arms. The officiant was simple, the words even simpler. No grand speeches, no elaborate promises. Just two people standing in front of each other, saying what they meant. I promise to see you, Dorian said, his voice steady. Not as a role, not as a function, but as a person. As the woman who saved my life by walking away from me. As the mother of my child. As someone who deserves to be loved for exactly who she is. Serafina's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. I promise to let you try. To give you the chance to be the person you say you want to be. To build something real with you, even when it's hard. Even when I'm scared. They exchanged rings, new ones, simple gold bands they'd chosen together. And when the officiant said, you may kiss, Dorian leaned in and kissed her like it was the first time, like it was the last time. Like it was the only time that mattered. The small group applauded. Vale woke up and started crying. Rose handed him to Serafina, who rocked him gently while Dorian stood beside her, his arm around her waist, and looked at the people gathered in the garden. Thank you, he said, for being here, for believing we could get here. Silas raised his glass. To second chances. To second chances, everyone echoed. They drank. They ate cake Rose had baked. They told stories and laughed and, for a few hours, forgot about everything that had come before. What? That night, after everyone had gone home and Vale was asleep, Serafina and Dorian sat in the library. The fire was burning low, the room warm and quiet. Serafina pulled an envelope from her pocket. I wrote you a letter the night I left. I never sent it. Dorian looked at the envelope. Do you want me to read it? No, I want to burn it. Why? Because that version of me, the one who wrote that letter, she was angry and hurt and lost. And I'm not her anymore. I don't want to be her anymore. She stood, walked to the fireplace, and held the envelope over the flames. It caught quickly, the paper curling and blackening, the words she'd written in desperation turning to ash. Dorian watched her, and when she turned back, he stood and crossed to her. I'm not the person I was either, he said. I don't know if I'm better, but I'm trying. I know. And I'm going to keep trying, every day, for the rest of my life. I know that too. He kissed her forehead, pulled her close. They stood like that, holding each other in the firelight, while outside the wind picked up and the first leaves of autumn began to fall. Years later, when Vale was 5 and running through the gardens at Ravenshade with the kind of fearless energy only children possess, Serafina would look back on that October night and realize it was the moment everything changed. Not the wedding, not the vow renewal, not even the birth of their son. It was the moment she burned the letter. The moment she let go of who she'd been and chose to become someone new. Dorian had changed too. He was patient now, present in a way he'd never been before. He coached Vale's Little League team, learned to cook passable pancakes, spent his evenings reading bedtime stories instead of negotiating deals. He was never going to be perfect. He was still controlling sometimes, still struggled with letting go, but he was trying, and that was enough. They had a second child 3 years later, a daughter they named Marielle after Serafina's aunt, and then, unexpectedly, a third, a boy they called Silas, after the lawyer who'd helped Serafina find her way out. Ravenshade filled with noise and laughter and the chaos of family life. Rose stayed on, becoming less of a housekeeper and more of a grandmother. The gardens were restored. The house itself came back to life. And Serafina became the person she'd always been meant to be. Not a trophy wife, not a strategic alliance, but a woman who'd walked through fire and come out stronger. A mother. A partner. A survivor. She and Dorian fought sometimes. Of course they did. But they also learned how to forgive, how to communicate, how to build a life that was messy and imperfect and entirely their own. One autumn evening, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Serafina stood at the window of the library and watched the leaves fall. Dorian came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is. How close we came to losing it all." "But we didn't." "No, we didn't." She turned in his arms, looked up at him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left that night? If I'd stayed?" "Every day." "And I think we would have destroyed each other. You would have disappeared into the role I forced you into, and I would have stayed the person I was, empty and alone and convinced it didn't matter. So I saved us." "You did," she smiled. "Then I guess walking away was the best decision I ever made." "Second best," Dorian corrected. "What was the first?" "Coming back." She kissed him, soft and slow, and felt the weight of everything they'd survived settle into something that felt almost like peace. Outside, the wind carried the last of the autumn leaves away. Inside, the fire burned warm and steady. And in the nursery upstairs, their children slept, safe and loved and surrounded by a family that had been broken and rebuilt from the ground up. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real.